In situations where they can't learn, no one is asking the right questions. No one is saying the right things. No one is willing to look dumb.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And I'm Joe.
And we are back with part 2 of our conversation with UX guru and longtime Cleveland Browns fan, Joe Natoli. And we're talking about the human element and how to add that and take that into account with design, when to go with the herd and when to kind of think about bucking prevailing wisdom and asking the right questions. But before we get to that, I just wanted to remind you, if you haven't done so already, to check out and add your thoughts in our SHMS podcast community on Facebook. And also to share this podcast with your friends and colleagues if you find it to be of value, hoping they will too. So let's get started. You know, what strikes me is the fact that you, again, jump in if I'm wrong, but it seems that if you're the UX guru, right, and that's how people come to you, and they're hiring you and they're thinking, if we get Joe in here, our product's going to look fantastic. It's going to work well for the customer. The customer's going to give it 10 out of 10, and that's great. And so you're going to also make it look pretty, because that's what I'm really interested in, making it look pretty. And then you're talking about all this process stuff.
Yeah.
So how's that go over, and why do you do that? No,
that's accurate. And even when clients come to me, okay, they come to me and they say, okay, we have this problem. We need to redesign this, right? It's terrible. We hate it. Customers hate it. We're not getting the results that we thought we would get. It needs to be redesigned.
Okay.
I hear that a lot.
Yes.
The first thing I do is, in a polite way, ignore that request.
Okay. Well, if you ignore it, so you've translated, we need to redesign it into...
This is just a prospect conversation.
Yeah.
We haven't even, contracted anything yet. I ignore it in that conversation. I say, well, that's okay. And you obviously realize there's a problem, which is good. Okay. Self-awareness is the first part of any progress.
Of growth.
Yeah, right. So, but what I say is, what I'm more interested in is what's happening. All right. What occurred to make you feel like, oh my God, we got to redesign this.
Okay.
Hey, what happened?
Yeah.
Because there's always a story, right?
Sure.
Just like your podcast.
There's always a story.
Here's my story. There's always a story. Tell me that story. Don't worry about the product. Don't worry about, just tell me the story. Tell me what led you here to this, like, oh God moment where we got to do something about this. Because that is the core of what needs to be solved. Now, there is always a UX part of that. There's always a design and development related part of that as well. Always. But the thing that I try to explain to them, at least in that initial conversation, is we also have to understand and think about these other parts. Because otherwise, you may pay me for 6 months, which isn't a small amount of money, okay? And I'll leave and everything will look good, and you'll roll it back out and everyone will have high hopes, and it'll fall flat again.
Yeah, it'll break.
So what's an example? I know I'm putting you on the spot. What kind of story? What kind of story do you hear that answers your question?
Well, I'll give you one. There was a company that was doing custom business services, right? For companies who have corporations. It's all these automated self-service type things to help you manage the mechanics of running a corporation.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm being nebulous on purpose.
Yeah.
These are big ticket items. It's very configurable services. And they rolled out this big self-service initiative where instead of having a sales rep hold your hand, it's now online, right? Companies can just go online and they say, well, I need this service and this and this and this, and they can configure it and they go through the process and they buy it, which is a big ticket item to click a button and go, okay, yeah, that's me. But there was great interest and it seemed like people really wanted it. So they did this, and this didn't come out in the initial conversation. All right. And what they kept telling me through the course of 3 conversations is it's bad. It's not working right. It's outdated. It's poorly designed. It's not doing what we thought it would do. And finally, I got to the point where I said, look, tell me what's happening here. What eventually came out is that people were abandoning the entire process during checkout after the very first step. They configured all their stuff.
Okay.
They got to the first step and it bailed out.
Yeah.
So I make a note in my notebook.
What's happening there?
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
Aside from all the other stuff they're telling me, this is a big deal. So anyway, we get the contract and I work with them. And the very first thing I did is I sat down with their development team and their product owners, and I said, again, walk me through this process, step me through your checkout process. I'm a customer, right? Let's do it on the screen. Show me what this looks like. And the first thing that I see is that their checkout process runs counter to every checkout process you've ever seen in your entire life.
In what way?
In the way that the minute I click off and go into the payment mode, I can no longer see what I've purchased.
Oh, nice.
This is a custom solution. It's got 15 different moving parts, okay? And you're paying for each one of those 15 parts.
And you want to be sure. It'd be like custom designing a car, right?
Correct.
And then not making sure that you like picked the right thing.
Number one. Number two, there is a vague reference to the overall product. That title is not the same as the title that you chose 15 steps ago.
Oh my God.
Okay. That's fair. That in and of itself is enough to stop.
I'd be like,
Sure,
I got to come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just the mechanics of first you enter in your information, then you enter in your payment information, and you're looking for certain signposts that say this is secure, we accept credit cards. There's all these very common, conventional things that happen in e-commerce checkouts. And isn't here.
Right. And just to like really simplify this because that's why I love this conversation, because it applies to so many things. Because what happened in that moment was fears.
Yes.
Like you created a moment where a customer can be really legitimately afraid of something, that they are going to ordering the wrong thing. And that is a place where, you spark a fear in somebody and you have just exponentially increased the possibility that you just lost them.
Right. So at the outset, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be a long-term contract. It's a good gig, right? And I like these people. But what I said, I have a choice, right, in that moment. Okay. And I think this does go back to everything that we're talking about in terms of you got to deal in reality, and you got to remember that there are people here and their emotions and their fears and everything else is on a table. I said, look, let's not redesign anything. Spend a week and fix these problems. Change these things. All right. We made a quick laundry list. Change these things. Let's live with it for 3 months and see what happens.
Yeah.
Now, they sort of looked at me like, well, are you like, that's what you want to do? Like, you don't want to, because I'm a consultant, right? The longer I'm there,
don't you want to do the big job?
Right.
Yeah.
I said, no, just do this. Let's see what happens. And in 3 months, conversion rate, completed checkouts goes up 200%.
Wow.
Right? That's not a small percentage.
No, not at all.
200%. Okay. And that's the thing. And this is, again, it's what I tell students all the time. When you're in that moment and you're faced with something and someone is telling you it's one way, you have to really resist the urge to just buy into that and say, okay, well, it's that way. That's the way it is. There's no value to be gained in that. If I hung around for another 3 months and did all sorts of other ancillary stuff, okay, that was probably worth doing, but wouldn't really solve the problem. If I leave, okay, and they still have the same problem 3 months from then, guess what? They're going, okay, we spent all this money with this guy.
Yeah.
And he's full of it, right? He didn't help us at all. That benefits nobody.
Right. So
towing the line benefits nobody when you're doing it blindly.
Right. And I think there's a pattern here, and it does tie back to the original story as well. And interestingly, I think it ties into what you do as a lawyer, Elliot, and I do facilitating conversations, is there's this natural inclination, and it makes sense. If you're going to reach out to a consultant or professional of some sort, it's because you've gotten to a point where you've decided on a solution that you need. You have problems.
Of
you're
course,
like,
yeah.
oh, we know what we need. We need a guy who can do that, or we need a woman who can do that. I know what's needed, which makes sense, because otherwise, who do you call? Like, I don't know necessarily a way around that.
Yeah, right.
The danger can be, though, when somebody comes in and they listen to that and just say like, oh, you know what you need. Here, I'll write your prescription for that. And the skill set that I think why all of us love this conversation is that anybody can get better at is in that moment, like pausing and asking these like diagnostic questions to try and track back to, let's be really clear what the problem is before we jump to that solution. But why do you think there's like the intolerance for that, I think, is strong? You really have to navigate that intolerance.
Because it's messy. It's scary. Yeah. It's unpredictable. And you can't immediately in that moment, you can't see a straight line between where you are right now and where you need to be.
Well, I think that maybe that's true, but maybe you do see a straight line, but you've convinced yourself that the line you're seeing is the one that's there. And I will tell you that this goes back, and you've heard me reference this before. This goes to a part of your former life when you were not just doing UX. When I called you in at the start of my law firm in 2002, and I said, okay, Joe, I really need to talk to somebody about, I had given up all my clients because I had gone and taken a gig as chief operating officer of a software company. And came back to practice. I had to get clients back. And I said, all right, Joe, I just need to talk to you about how do I get my clients back and all that stuff. And you said, well, let's find out why your clients came to you. What do they like? And we can build on that. And I said, oh, I'll tell you exactly what they like. They like, I'm a good lawyer. I know what I'm doing. And I know this, I know that. And you could have said, okay, well then that's great. Let's do this. And what you said to me was, yeah, I don't care what you think. You said, I'm not asking you. What I want to do is I want to go out and talk to your former clients. I want to find out what they say. Yeah. And you came back to me and said, yeah, they assumed you were a good lawyer. That's the price of admission. What they said was, and you gave me like these top 5 things like, oh, yeah, that's it. And so the reason I bring that up is because even in a different facet, it's not UX. This was marketing and branding, and it could be other things. Right. Your immediate reaction, which taught me a lot, was to question my assumptions, even though theoretically I had much greater knowledge about my relationship with these people than you would. Sure. Yeah. So my assumption was well-founded. Yeah. It was just wrong.
It was really funny that there was a to-do app many years ago called Producteev, and they were one of the first people to have the natural language. You could type in the thing, call so-and-so tomorrow, and it would take tomorrow and flag it the next day. And give it just so that ease of that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Especially for some of my really attention deficit disorder clients. I'm like, this could actually work for them because they wouldn't have to click 17 different boxes. And so I was actively evangelizing about it and signing other people up and putting them in my accounts and doing all these things. And they were really young startups. And I was trying to work with them to be able to have multiple accounts. All that's a very boring part of the story. But when I reached out, I said, I love this thing. I would love to talk to you about possibly some minor customization so that I can roll this out to other people. And the lady wrote back and she goes, oh, I'm so glad you like it. Is it the whatever their logo guy mascot thing, the platypus or the beaver or whatever? She's like, we know people like it because it's fun. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I would not be rolling this out to the CEOs of growing companies because you have a cute mascot. You couldn't be more.
Yes, that's it.
I'm not looking for a fun to-do list. And I was actually quite disturbed. I'm like, wow, you're so off the mark. But they had no idea what their actual value was. Clearly. It was really crazy.
Exactly. And because in many cases, in situations where they can't learn, no one is asking the right questions. No one is saying the right things. No one is willing to look dumb. I mean, I just started a column for an organization called UX Mastery, where this idea of doing a monthly column had appealed to me for a while, right? And so the owner and I are talking about it, and he's like, well, what do you want to call it? And what I came up with was Ask Anyway. Because it goes with everything we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Right here, right? Okay, you have to, there are no stupid questions. We've all heard that cliche a million times, and everyone goes, oh yeah, there's no stupid questions. It's the truth. Okay. In every situation, I can't think of a single thing I've ever done in my life or my career or anything else where there wasn't value in asking that question that's on the tip of your tongue, no matter how bad you feel about asking it, no matter how worried you are about looking stupid, about even how humiliating it feels sometimes to say something that you feel like is a dumb thing to say.
Well, that fear of looking dumb, or like if I ask the question, it makes it look like I don't know. I feel like a one-trick pony sometimes at how often, to me, it almost feels like that IT one-trick pony of have you tried rebooting? But the number of times I say, well, have you asked them? Because they'll say how should I handle this with my team? I was thinking for yourself, but I don't know what, and they feel like they have to work it all out first and then present it. And not only is that a lot harder, but your chances of hitting the mark are drastically reduced. I'm like, have some ideas, but ask them. Exactly. And then they'll be into it. Ask your customers, ask your team. Just have you tried asking them?
I can't believe the way this is going, right? Literally, last it wasn't quite last night. It was around 6 or 7 o'clock. Someone asked a question in the group. The Facebook group that I run. And they're like, I got this big presentation. We're trying to pitch this client. We're trying to win this client. I want to present these mock-ups, and here are my ideas about, how I'm going to do them. What format do you guys think is the best? And normally everybody chimes in. I happen to see it before anyone had answered. So I said, well, you need to ask that same person what do you need to walk away? What information do you need to walk away with upon seeing this? What questions does it need to answer for you? Okay. What do you need to know, understand, feel good about as a result? Because the answer to that question is what dictates what you show and how you show it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But the temptation is to lead with, well, here's what I know. Here are the standard formats for doing that. Here's the recipe for doing that. And this is the wrong way to do anything.
And what you're talking about is so, like, I couldn't even begin to list all the ways it's applicable. One of the most freeing things I learned from a woman that I know who's given me tons of wisdom over the years. I was talking to her one time. I was trying to write this proposal, and this thing she said with me just landed, but it's the same concept. I said, I don't know. I don't know if I should structure it this way or that way. And I don't know where I should price it. And I don't know if I should divvy it up this way. And she said, look, if you are writing a proposal and it is this hard, you haven't asked enough questions. She's like, and she goes, I know you already had one conversation. Go back and ask another round of questions. And from that day forward, I ask all the questions I think I need. And then I go off. And if I'm having a hard time, I go back and ask more questions. And when it's easy enough that I know exactly what to propose, then we're good. And that was so liberating to not feel like I had to, like it was my job to have some magic crystal ball that's like, oh, here's what you need.
Well, so let me ask, what happens if let's say that's part of your makeup. You need to ask more questions. And you're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. We need to ask questions. So I'm curious if when you go in and you've said, I don't care about all that stuff that the client says, have you had a situation where in these initial meetings, somebody says, that's great that you want to go into our process. That's great. Not in this word, but do what we tell you to do.
Oh, yeah.
We'll pay you the money.
Sure.
Do what we tell you to do. And then my question is really, well, what do you do? Do you go down that path? Is that not the right fit? What do you do?
I say no.
Why?
I say no. And
you can make a lot of money by saying yes.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I have in the past.
And then, so what changed?
I have in the past. What changed is that you go through a couple situations like that where you do say yes. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, you're the client, you're paying. Early on in my career, right? You're doing it. And you want the business, right? Because you're trying to build something and you're afraid of not making your rent every month.
Yeah.
And so you say yes. You say, okay, well, I'll do that. I'll be an order taker, glorified order taker, and we'll do it. And inevitably, there were 2 times in particular where I did that and it blew up spectacularly. Did exactly what they asked for. Tried here and there to interject. I really think this is probably not the right thing. Just do what we tell you.
Yeah.
And I did, and it blew up. Okay, it got them. What happened is what I expected would happen in both cases. Not because I'm omnipotent in any way or know everything. It's just after you have a certain amount of experiences, you're like, okay, I can see where the road's going here. And it was bad, and they blamed me.
Because they're paying you money and they didn't get the outcome they want.
And after the second time, it was so bad and it bothered me on an emotional level to a really great deal because it became really contentious. I said, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
I'm never doing this again. And that was advice that had been given to me before.
We actually did a whole episode on that, like when to turn a client away.
And one guy in particular, Ed Gold, who a lot of folks locally in Baltimore know. I used to meet up with him for lunch every once in a while. I've always considered the guy a mentor. And he used to tell me all the time, you got to learn how to say no to things. And it took me quite a few years and more than a couple broken noses to get to that point. So now, if I sense it's going that way, I just say, look, I'm not that guy. There are people who will do that for you. I have to pass, and I want you to understand the reason I'm passing. Again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But at this point in my life, especially after doing this for so long, I got a lot of time over the target. I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
And there's a really good chance I know how it ends. I don't want to be part of that. I don't want you to go through that. And I don't want to be part of, making that happen for you.
So you know what's interesting is if
there's nothing good about that.
If I look back over the entire arc of everything that we've just recorded, which by the way, I think needs to be 2 episodes.
Yes.
So because this would be one very gigantic episode. So no, this is fat. I could talk for like 3 more. Yeah. But like you're hitting like every geek button I have here. So I said to you before we started recording that had I known it was a thing, I may have gone into user experience as an entire career. But anyway, as I sit here and I sort of scan back over everything we talked about from your very first story of being 17 in that office, clear through everything about like asking questions to get to the root cause, clear through to saying no to a client. There is this theme, a couple themes really, but one of them is like standing your ground for the truth of something,
Yeah.
and
For your truth.
for your truth in a thing. And you were saying towards the end there, I'm not the smartest. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. This goes back to the whole looking dumb thing. I wish everyone just could sort of shake off the perceptions of smart and dumb. It's not about that. It's like, what is your truth and what is your truth? And if they don't match up, it's okay for those things to part ways and go opposite ways. If everyone's holding fast to their truth of a thing, it's like it all sorts out on its own.
It's not just okay for things to part, for people to part ways. Sometimes that's the best of all possible solutions.
Best of all possible solutions. Like if you can just be honest, not just in the like, don't tell a fib way, but stay like honest and true and authentic and keep asking questions until it feels honest and true and authentic. Because what I'd separate that from is when somebody has come in with like a solution to a thing, that's not a truth. Their problem they're having is the truth, and they've come up with a way to try and fix it. And so like holding less tightly to those solutions and more tightly to just the core truth of what's already happening. Like you said, to map it out.
You get to a certain point in your career and people see you a certain way and they think, well, it's easy for you to do that. Right? It's easier for you to say, no, you're at this point in your career where you have acumen, you have recognition, you have whatever. That nothing could be more false. It's never easy. Not ever. It's always an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
There's always some part of your own brain that's going, how dare you turn down work?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
That never goes away.
You never, you'd be like, what if this is my last chance at a...
Never okay.
If you've ever struggled to make payroll or rent, that doesn't leave you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I was on a phone call with a potential client, and I could just tell that they wanted somebody who like already had, and it's not that this is bad or wrong. It's just, it comes back to their fears. They wanted somebody who had a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 process already off the shelf that I was going to come in and like crank them through.
And there's a lot of that.
And I could tell that if they worked with me, where it's not like I just pull it out of the thin air. I'm like, there is a process, but it's a more nuanced, amorphous, as figured out as we go kind of process.
And it's flexible.
And I knew that was going to freak them out. And I literally, thank God I was on the phone, because I closed my eyes to say the words, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to say this. I said, I can tell that you really want this, and I'm going to drive you crazy. And I'm just not the right person. I know somebody else who is, and I can refer you, but you're going to hate working with me. And that was a terrifying thing to say, but I could just tell it would have been a nightmare for them and a nightmare for me. But
just like engagements, I'm sure. And I wonder if either of you guys deal with the same kind of thing where, let's say you get hired to do let's say a time span. It's 3 days, it's 5 days, it's whatever.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, well, can we have an agenda? And I say, yeah, but.
I hate agendas. I do them because I have to, but I hate them.
After day one, this all is completely up in the air.
Right. When I send them, I'm like,
what happens on the first day dictates what we spend the other 3 days doing.
No, that's exactly right.
No, I say, here's an idea, but I can tell you right now, it's not going to go like this. But I get that I can't just say, we'll figure it out as we go. So I'm much more honest about it now. I'm like, here it is. But it's not going to go this way.
Detail around that, right? And the reason for why that is, but man, I hate that. I hate that entire concept.
It's funny because that concept and some of the others you mentioned, those are, for what it sounds like you've built in, the telltale signs when something's just not right. Then, this is, and I've developed my own phrase for this when I turn down a client. And as I've said before, I have never once in my career regretted turning down a client, but I have regretted taking on some.
Yes,
but sure. My line is, this will not allow me to do my best work.
Oh, that's
whatever it is. This engagement, perfect. It doesn't mean that you're an idiot or you're this or you're that, whatever. It's like, for whatever reason, this will not allow me to do my best work. And I have my telltale signs on what that
Do you know what I wish? I wish 17-year-old Joe well, actually, I really like what you said to that guy, but that is basically what you were saying, is that will not allow me to do my best work.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village,
Yes, it does.
we'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.